Now let's look at the different types of locators which are present in Selenium WebDriver. So we'll check one by one what are the usage, how do you use them, and what are the best practices while coming to locators, right? Which locator is the best for your application? So we'll look at all these things. So let's start with our first locator, which is the ID. Now, this is considered the most preferred and fastest way of locating an element. That's because ID is always considered to be unique for an element within an application. It's hardly possible that you will have a duplicate ID for different elements in the application, right? And because it is unique, it is the most fastest way of locating that particular element, right? Because it doesn't need to iterate through different elements and try to find whether it's unique or not. It will directly reach there and it will take that ID of that particular element. So that's how it is the fastest and also the most preferred way, right? So whenever you have an ID for an element, just go for it. Don't think about that I want to create XPath for this or not. You should use an ID, hands down. So let's see a practical example of it, right? So for this video, I'm going to use this particular website, the mavenapache.org, because it has got a lot of links and other elements which I wanted to show you through the locators, right? So that's the reason I'm using this. Now, to search a particular ID, right? So let me just go to the home page here. And so actually this element has got an ID. So let's look at this. So I'll go to inspect and yeah. So as you can see, it has got an ID and it has also got a name, right? So we'll be using this ID, which is the query. So I'll copy this and I'll come back here and I want to enter something in that field, right? So find element and by dot ID. So then we will be putting in the value here for the locator and then we'll enter something here. So let's enter Maven, right? So this is how you use a by ID locator, right? By.id locator. You get the value of that locator and then you use it here to identify it and perform some actions, right? So we already discussed this in our find element video, right? So let's quickly test this out. So it should enter this text into the search field, right? Which we are trying to find. So yeah, it is opening now and it will go to that search field. Yeah, and it will type Maven, right? So that's the intended action we wanted to perform on our application. So let's jump on to the next one, right? So our next one is name. Now, if you don't have an ID, name is considered again the next best locator for an element, but it is not always necessary that it will be unique. So make sure whenever you are giving a name locator, it should be unique. Otherwise, your script may fail because there will be multiple elements and it will not be able to decide which element to click, right? So now let's again look at our script. So how we are going to use it is the same way. So use the by class and then you take the locator which you want to use and then the value. And then again, we will perform the same action here also, right? So as we saw, it has also got a name, right? So it's Q and we can directly use it here, right? So again, check it out. Actually, I should have commented the first one because it is going to perform both the actions on the same field. But anyways, let's check it out. Okay, so as you can see, it has entered 2 times, but no problem. Like we are just trying to test our script right here. So in the real world scenario, you should have cleared this field and then entered this text, right? But it is doing what we intended to do. So that's fine. So jumping on to the next locator, it is linkText, right? Now, the thing to remember here is linkText, it finds the element by its text, right? And it is only applicable for hyperlinks, not for any other element. So remember this when you are trying to use this locator, right? So let's jump again here and we'll try to test this out. So by dot link text this time, and then we will try to click on it, right? Okay, so now there are lots of links on this page, so I can use any one of them, but let's use this features, right? So this features link I want to click on, and this is the text, right? Features. So let me use that, and I'll rather comment these two out. I just want to test this one. So let's click on this and see if it is working. So it's pretty easy to find any link by the link text. So whenever you're working with links and it has got a text, you should always prefer link text, right? If you don't have any other unique locator as ID or name. So I clicked on features, right? So let's move on to the next one, which is partial link text. Now it is pretty similar to link text because it is also applicable for hyperlinks, but the only difference is in link text, it matches the whole text, but in partial link text, it matches only a portion of the text. So even if a portion of the text is similar, it's going to perform the operation on that particular element. It is going to identify that element. So you should make sure the portion of the element which you are giving for your locator should be unique. Otherwise, again, your script will fail, right? So we will try to use this same element for partial link text and we'll see whether it is able to click or not, right? So I'll just change this locator to partial link text and let me just clear it out. So dot click, and here I'll use features. So rather than using features, now let me remove this S. So it's a kind of partial text, right? So we'll see whether it is able to identify the element using a partial link text. So let's test it out quickly. So it's generally useful when you have dynamically changing links, right? So that time you can easily identify them using the partial link text. So as you can see, it is clicked on the features, right? So it's working. So let's move on to our next locator, which is the tag name, right? Now tag name, it's generally not useful when you're trying to identify unique, a unique element out of your page, but it's useful when you are trying to get a number of multiple elements with the same kind of identifier, right? So there are situations where you want to grab all the elements of a particular type, right? At that time, you can use tag name. So every element has a tag name in the HTML page, right? So there are lots of different types of tags like div. For link, it is a. Then for button, it is button, right? So there are lots of tag names present, and you can use them anyways to in different scenarios. So what's our scenario now? So I want to get all the links present on this particular page, right? I want to get the text of each link which is present in the page. So how will I do that? So I need to use a list. because it's a list of elements, right? So element list, and then this time, rather than using find element, I'm going to use find elements because I want to get a list of elements, not a single element, right? So remember that. Now I'll use tag name, and here I'll be using A so that it gets me all the links which have the tag name A, right? And I think that's it, right? So now what we should do is we will iterate through each of the element, right? So it's web element, and I'll iterate through this list, and then I'll try to find the text of each element and print it, right? So I'll directly print it out, println, and then element dot get text, right? So it will return me the text of that particular element. So this is how you can grab all the links and print out that text, right? You can also perform click operations if you want to check out all your links. So it's an easy way of doing this to check all the links on your page are working or not. So let's do this and see whether it is able to do that or not. So it is opening the page. It will grab all the links which have, or all the elements which have the tag name A, and then it will iterate through the list and get me all the text of all the elements, right? Okay, so if I can expand this, right, you can see there are lots of links, right, on this page. So these are the text of each of the links. Now there will be some links which are not valid, right? So we need to filter them out in real-time scenario, but right now I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to show you how you can use this. Also, there will be we'll get this kind of exceptions because on this page, right, there are links which are not visible right now to the page. So maybe you need to scroll down using some JavaScript executor and get all the links, right? That's why it is showing element is not attached to page document, right? But it rather showed us like it is able to grab all the elements with the tag name A, right? So that's how you use the locator tag name. Okay, so that's done. Now let's move on to the next one, which is class name. Now you will find many elements which have this property like class, right? So it will have a class name anyhow, but generally this locator provides you with duplicate elements because more than one element will have the same class name. It's very rare that you will get a unique class name for an element, but if you get, you can use it. If you don't find any other identifier or locator, you can go for class name, right? So let's see if we can get one in our page. So let me first write the command to do this. So I'll be using by dot class name, and I'll define the value and I'll do some operation here, right? So let's see if we have got something here. Let's check this out, the license link. Okay, so it has got a class which is called external link. Now I'll try to click on this link, right? So let's do this. And let me close my earlier browser. So let's quickly check it out. So it is going to find that element by the class name, and it is going to click. Now remember, if there are again multiple elements with the same class name, it may not work, right? So it clicked on the license and it is showing me the new page here, right? So it performed the operation which it was intended to. So let's quickly go to the next one, which is Xpath, and then we have the CSS selector, right? So Xpath, now this is considered to be the most important locator in Selenium. That's because generally you don't have so easy identifiers like ID, name, link text, generally don't find elements with that, right? So in real-time scenarios, you will have to construct different XPaths, and they may be complex depending on the application which you are using. So this considered one of the most important ones in uh, Selenium, along with you can also use CSS Selector, but generally people do prefer XPath, right? So let's do this now. We want to get XPath, right? So in the previous session, I showed you what's the difference between a relative XPath and a static XPath, right? So you can use both. So let's see now what we can use here, right? Um, so I will use the same features link, right? So I will try to get the license of this particular Maven page. So let me construct the XPath for this, right? Now I can directly copy it also from here, but I want to use the XPath so that it can identify the element using the text of this particular link, right? So we'll do this, and then I will use text, and I will use license, right? So don't worry, I'm going to show you how you can use these kind of variations in text in XPath, but this is a kind of relative XPath for your element, right? So you can use this directly here. And it will able to click on this license link now. So let's check it out. So it is clicking, right? So similarly, you can use any identifier or any element along with XPath, right? So you can use like something like this. So if I can show you, so by dot XPath, right? And then I can actually use ID for a particular element, right? So at ID equals to something value, and then dot click. So this way you can use ID, name, and any of the identifiers which we already saw inside the XPath to identify a particular element. You can construct your own XPath, right? So this is how, and also as I told you earlier, you can also use the static XPath, right? You can copy it from here, copy full XPath, and you can directly use this also. But generally, I don't usually prefer that or recommend that, right? Now, coming to the next one, the CSS selector, right? It combines element selector with the value. So you have to provide the selector type and the value to identify an element using CSS selector, right? And there are two types. One is class, one is ID. Now class is identified by a dot and ID is identified by a hash sign. So when you use these signs, Selenium identifies the element based on a class or a ID using the CSS selector, right? So it's also a pretty good way of identifying elements, especially if you're working with I browser, it's considered to be much faster. So you can use this selector. So, so what I'll be using here is, I'll use this ID, right? So, which is be used in the previous statement. So what you need to type here, if you're using a ID, you need to first type hash and then the value of that particular, right? So value is query. So it's a text box. So I'm going to enter something here, right? and let me enter um, query or Maven, and let me execute this. So you can use different selectors again with CSS selector, right? You can use ID, you can use name, and there are other selectors, CSS selectors as well, right? So it is typing here. So similarly, you can use the dot and then you can use a class, right? So previously we used this external link as a class name. So you can use dot and then this value external link, and then you can perform the operations on the same. So using CSS selector. So these are all the selectors which are present in Selenium. Now, depending on the scenario and your application, you have to decide which is the best selector for your case, right? So there's nothing wrong or right. It's what is right for your application. And you need to make sure that you are able to identify the elements uniquely so that your scripts are robust and they do not fail in between your execution, right? So that's what I wanted to show here. In the next sections, we'll be covering a lot more topics around the Selenium. So we'll look at how you can use different classes like action class, how to handle different pop-ups, alert boxes, and many more things, right?